WCLN 1170 Radio and Cable Channel 16 are pleased to present We Should Know, hosted by J.W. Simmons, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative as we consider closely what we should know.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We Should Know is on the air every Tuesday at 2:30. My name is J.W. Simmons, your host. We come to you from Star Communications Channel 16, also simulcast on WCLN Radio. Special treat today for you. We're talking with Dr. Larry Bell. Dr. Bell, I'm going to introduce you today as Dr. Larry Mosley Bell Sr. You were born August 18, 1939. Dr. Bell, you have been a man of service for over 50 years. You have had 18 years in the North Carolina General Assembly. You've served District 21, Sampson, Duplin, and Wayne counties. Graduated from A&T University. You've been a teacher, principal, coach, central office administrator, assistant superintendent, superintendent of schools. You've also served as county commissioner. You've served on the board of directors of Sampson Community College. And I'm probably going to miss something somewhere along the line here, and we're going to talk about that. I want to thank you for taking time to sit down, because I wanted to kind of look at your path and your journey from a similar environment, as many people in the area, from an agricultural environment, but help us look at that as you made your way from that, I will say, tobacco field to the State House in Raleigh, North Carolina. What do you recall when you look back? You were born in the Hargrove community, and literally in a period of time that there was a lot going on. I think when I look back at 1939, George Peterson was the mayor of City of Clinton. I know you can't remember that because you were just born. But in 1939, there was a lot of other things going on. The governor of North Carolina was Clyde Hoey, which or it might have been pronounced Ho. I'm not Hoey. As you look at your life, at what point in time in that journey do you start remembering things that made an impact in your life?
Well, thank you for having me on today. About the first thing that I can remember during my lifetime was having a birthday party at the age of 3.
Wow. I
remember having that in the yard. You know, they had it outside in the yard, and I can remember that, and that's about it. And from 3 on, I can tell you.
Did you come from a large family?
In my family, we had there was one girl, and there was 4 boys. So there were five children, 7 of us in all. I can remember that very well because at Christmas time, my mother would cook 7 cakes. I think all of us had a taste for different ones, and she would cook 7 cakes every year.
In that period of time, there was a lot of things that was done, and we just been through this past year a major pandemic, and folks were kind of forced to stay at home and not a lot of interaction. But during the period of time we're talking about here in the 40s and early 50s, most folks stayed not only at home, but within their community. Is that kind of how you grew up in that kind of, I'm not going to say confined situation, but there was just nowhere to go, and if you went anywhere, it went over like 10 miles or so?
That is correct. We didn't even travel 10 miles. Almost everything that we did was right there in the community, from one house to the next. As we played around as children, we played in each other's yard. We didn't have what we didn't have, we made. We made our little carts and pushed little rims and things down the road with wire and things like that. And so that has been very good, you know, as far as having to make those things that made you very creative, making rabbit boxes and you brought in bird houses, those kinds of things that ended up helping you to hone some skills that over the years that you might use in shop classes and that kind of thing, you know.
It was kind of an example, and I think one of the things that I noticed in looking at your background, it was fairly similar to a lot of people in a rural area. There was so many similarities because you mentioned different kinds of animals for protein and food sources. Folks now in rural areas do hunting and all that kind of thing. And during that period of time, a lot of that was part of their food source.
That is correct. We had practically everything right there on the farm. And what we didn't have, our neighbors had it. You know, I lived next to a turkey farm even then, but they didn't have the turkeys that were white like they have today. They were the mixed, colorful turkeys. You know, like you see the pictures in the books. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of turkey we had. It was Junius Lucas had the farm, and you probably remember his daughter used to run the store here in Clinton, mm-hmm. Or the Jordans. Mm-hmm. You probably know where that is. Mm-hmm. And they had the turkeys, and if you wanted a turkey for Christmas or anything like that, that's where you would go to try to buy one from them. So we knew that they had a turkey farm. But everybody else had chickens. You had hogs and everything. And so many times my dad would say, looking on the table, he said, "We're eating at home today," which meant that everything that we had on the dinner table, we grew it right there at the house. So we had it right there mm-hmm. at the house. We didn't have to buy anything from a store or anything like that. Mm.
When we're talking about growing animals at that time, most folks have a different perspective, but most of everything that was grown was what we would probably refer to today as free range. It was out on a dirt floor, or the hogs were in a pen somewhere, and you would have something you call slops.
That's
you would
correct.
give to the hogs. Is that the same kind of environment?
That is correct. And I remember arguing one day in a committee in the House when they were talking about restricting people from having chickens and hogs and things like that in the house because of the big farms that you have today. They said that they might contaminate or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so I spoke against it because of my background.
You'd experienced it.
I said how important it is for people to have their own chickens and hogs and ducks or whatever they want to have around the house, you know, and as long as they can contain them and not let them bother anybody else. I didn't see any reason why you couldn't grow these things yourself, because that's the way I grew up, that we had everything right there on the farm. You had your gardens where you grew your vegetables. You canned them. You know, we didn't have freezers like we have today, so I had to put them in jars. Those mason jars or whatever you call them. Mm-hmm. And so we had the canning. You had the smoke houses where you put your meat in and let it cure out and everything. And so just everything that you needed was right there at the house. Didn't have to buy anything from the store.
During that period of time, did you have a lot of dependence on each other as a family and on each other as a community? There was not really anybody else to turn to, as I've read during the 40s and 50s. That was pretty much it. You had the people around you or your family. That
is correct. So you learned quite a bit from the skills that other people had in the community, where they would be doing things. And if we had a garden with a lot of turnips in it or whatever it is, the neighbors could come over and get some of that or whatever. Some people had sweet potatoes, whatever. So we all shared and made sure that nobody was hungry in the community, that we just shared what we had with each other.
Was the core values, we hear a lot about today about things like core values and principles and those kinds of things. For you, where was that drawn from? Where was that sense of character, how did that come together for you?
Well, my family had a strong religious background. My grandfather was a minister, and then I understand my grandmother's mother had ministered in her family, so there were a whole lot of them were. So I just grew up in that kind of thing where we had the altar prayer in the house and this kind of thing. And my dad was a deacon of the church. My mama started playing the piano in the church when she was 13 years old, because she was playing at the church where her father was pastor over at Roseboro. Mm-hmm. So I just had that kind of background, so that I always say I walk by faith. Mm-hmm. And that was it. I just believed that all things were just possible if you wanted to do something. You know, if you had the faith and believed that anything that you wanted to do, you could get it done by getting out there, putting, as they say, putting your shoulder to the wheel, whatever it is, and go forward. And that's kind of what I believed in, and doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. And that was the principle that I think that all of us tried to live by.
Those principles seem to be not only key for you during that time, but even today, as I said here, and my experience with you over the past years has been strong throughout your journey.
Yeah, that's been the guiding principle that I've lived by all of my life, you know, doing unto others as I would have them to do unto me. And it has worked for me over the years for 81 years, and so, so I still keep it going in my life.
We're going to take a break. When we come back from to our next segment, I want to try to get a little deeper into that next step for you.
Okay.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us. We're talking with Dr. Larry Bell. We're talking about that pathway, that journey. We'll be back in a moment.
Experiencing slow internet? If you have a fast internet package, the problem is most likely your wireless router. With more devices using Wi-Fi, your wireless router may not be able to deliver the speed and coverage you need. We now have the leading solution to enhance your internet experience. Using small devices in a mesh network, these Wi-Fi appliances cover just about any size home, so that all your devices can operate to their fullest potential. Whole home Wi-Fi from Star Communications. Get the most out of your internet connection.
Welcome back, folks. We Should Know is on there. I have a guest today that a lot of you know, been around for quite a while, public service for over 50 years, Dr. Larry Bell. Dr. Bell, thank you for being with us. We talked in the first segment about your early stages of life in the 40s and the early 50s. There was a period of time there that in that agricultural setting, in the fields, and as we talked about free-range chickens and turkeys and everything, but there was something in your later early adulthood, teenage years or wherever. Kind of tell us when, where, and what caused you to start maybe directing your trajectory for life that would not necessarily be right there on the farm and agriculture. What was the things that impacted and steered your life?
Well, I had a strong agricultural background, as you know, by living on a farm all of my life. When I started high school, I took agriculture for 4 years. And the person who had the most influence on my life was my agriculture teacher. And I can remember one day he asked us the question, what do we want to do in life? And all of us had these different things that we wanted to do. I wanted to be a teacher. And then he asked us what were we doing to prepare ourselves for that. He wanted to go to school, to college or whatever, and he just started pointing out things to us on the board, you know, said, how many of you want a new automobile? How many of you want a new house or whatever? Then he started telling us what you had to do to get there, how much money you had to make to buy a new car, how much money you had to make to live the kind of life that we were talking about. And whenever you did, they said, now can you do that working at this kind of job or that kind of job? And then I had to think, I said, no, if I do that, I need a college education. I need to do something other than what I had planned to do because, to just stop and do what I'd been doing. I needed to further my education. So that kind of put me on that trajectory of deciding that I needed to go to college or whatever. And I didn't have any idea of how I was going to do that at that time because I knew my parents could not send me to college, I didn't think, because we didn't have the money to do that. I had one brother before me who did decide to go to school, and all of us worked to try to get him there. And one of the things that my dad did was he said, if he's going off to school, all of you are going to have to agree that we're going to have to work on the farm and make the money to send him to school, because he was kind of like the one with the brain in the family. He's a strong math major and a math person. And all of us kind of looked up to him as being the person who was high in academics. And so we all worked hard to try to send him to school and everything. And he would not let us work for anybody else as far as going out and working. We had to work to make sure that farm produced enough to pay the bills at the end of the year. And I remember I was telling my son the other day, I can remember that my dad would always borrow money to send my brother to school from Dunn Production Credit Company. Of course, they would let him have some money that he could pay back at the end of the year. And so that bill that you had to pay in January, he would always borrow it and pay the tuition for that second semester. He did it for my brother, then he did it for me. But one thing about when my brother finished school and started working in Virginia, he told me, said, you need to stay home and try to be near my dad and mom. And said, I'm up here, but I'll help you go to school. So he helped me through college. Now,
your brother was the eldest in the family and you were the next?
Yeah, he was older than me. He was not the oldest, but he was the second oldest.
Okay.
But he kind of set the pace for the rest of us. And every one of us finished high school, and all of us had some kind of training beyond high school.
Was your parents a strong force in encouraging that education?
Oh, definitely. My dad would work with us at night, as far as making sure we got our homework, and he loved math himself. And so he would always come up with different kinds of little games that he would play with us, checking our memory and math skills and spelling and all of those kinds of things. And he just kind of pushed us in that direction and made sure we would go to Sunday school and learn our lessons there. Teachers would teach us and all of that. And so, he was a strong advocate for education.
Now, correct me here now, because you were on the farm, but he also had a job with the school system itself, if I understand.
That was later. After most of us left, and they built school at Hoggrove in 1957. He became the custodian out there, and so that's when he kind of left the farm. Not totally, because once you're a farmer, you always do something on the farm.
It's always a comfort zone for you.
Yeah, but he did work at Hoggrove School as a custodian. Then he left there and came to the courthouse in Clinton, and he worked in the courthouse in Clinton for 18 years as a custodian.
Wow, wow. So talk to us about that journey through high school. You mentioned you graduated from Clinton High School.
No, even though I lived in the Hot Grove area, that's one of the things my son asked me about the other day. For a while, Sampson County did not send any buses out to our area, but Duplin County did.
Oh, okay.
So I was only 5 miles from Faison, and Faison had a high school as well in the beginning. And so most of the people in that area, the Hot Grove area, went to Faison and to Warsaw, Douglas High School in Warsaw. So I graduated Douglas High School in Warsaw.
But lived in Sampson County.
I lived in Sampson County all of my life.
So it was a matter of distance rather than territory you lived in.
That's correct. And see, and then they changed the school. They consolidated Warsaw and Faison. And at some point in time, and I think when my brother that I was telling you about, when he became a junior or senior, he had to go to Warsaw instead of Faison. And so that's all I knew was that school system. So when I started school, I went to Warsaw as well.
How important were grades as far as the academic ABCD kinds of grades in high school for you to be able to transition to college? Now you look at not only academic GPAs and taking the tests to see if you can even qualify to get into college and that kind of thing. Was it still pretty strenuous, long step to be able to have the necessary academic skills to make that transition?
Yeah, it was then, and usually your principals at school then, they were so small, the schools were so small, they would almost determine the students who would be moving on, and they would kind of give you that extra push and say you ought to go to college, or maybe you should try something else. And so our teachers were pretty much strong in the guidance area as far as guiding you to that kind of thing.
Did you start and finish your academics at A&T, or was there something in between that that you felt that you needed to do before you went to A&T? And about what year was your experience at A&T?
No, I started North Carolina A&T in 1957 and finished in 1961. So I had 4 years. And when I left there, I went back in the early 70s and received my master's from there. And then I went to East Carolina to get my advanced degree. Yeah, that's right.
What was the most notable thing for you as a agricultural background that grew up in that kind of environment, and then you step in a university setting? What did your senses start saying to you when you stepped into that large university setting after leaving a farm rural community up in the Hargrove area?
I was afraid when I got there, because I caught a ride to North Carolina A&T. I'd never traveled that far in my life, to Greensboro. And so now I caught a ride with a gentleman from over here to Turkey, William Moses Marcy. Took me up there, and he charged me $5 to carry me up there with his son. And I was definitely frightened. Borrowed the money from a relative of mine to pay my tuition because my daddy didn't have it at that time, but he promised the guy that he would pay him back when he sold tobacco that year. And so that's where I went up there on borrowed money. And my motivation was that I didn't want to disappoint my parents. If they were going to invest in my education, that I had to work real hard when I got there.
We're going to take a break. I want to pick up when we come back to this next segment, because you just said something I think is critically important, and that is you didn't want to violate that sense of trust that your parents had for you. that is, to me, one of the most critical pieces that we need to hear about in our society today. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We're going to be back in a moment, continue our conversation with Dr. Larry Bell on his path to the State House.
At home or away, knowing who is at your door is priceless. Star Communications is here to help with its doorbell security camera by Skybell. Live viewing and two-way audio equips you with the ability to always see and greet anyone that shows up at your door. If this is the kind of confidence you are looking for, call Star Communications today at 1-800-706-6538 to learn more about this intelligent security that you can always depend on.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you for being with us. We Should Know is on the air every Tuesday at 2:30, simulcast with BCLN Radio, Star Communications Channel 16. We're talking with Dr. Larry Bell. Dr. Bell, we've been talking a lot about your experience, 18 years in Raleigh as a legislator, serving 3 counties. You were making a comment when we went to break about your journey to A&T and your trip up there and kind of some of the things that oftentimes folks overlook. But one thing you mentioned was this important piece that was driving you is that you knew it was a different environment. It seemed that you were expressing this difference, but at the same time, you had to accomplish that because you didn't want to disappoint your parents. Talk to us about that forward as you move forward at A&T.
Yeah, I knew that I had to study, and if I had any weaknesses or whatever it was, that I had to try to overcome them. So I didn't go up there to play around. I studied real hard, and as a matter of fact, I was probably in the top of my class at that time because I made my first grades were 3.27 average. When I got there, I remember that very distinctly because
that was outstanding.
It was kind of outstanding as a freshman, and I knew I had to do that because I stayed in the dormitory and I studied, didn't get involved in too many other activities. And the other thing was that I had a music background back with my mother playing the piano and organ in church and everything. So I had learned to sing a little bit, and I did that same thing in high school. I was in the chorus there. And so when I got to the university, I joined the choir. I sang in the university choir and the male choir that they had there. So it took most of my time studying and rehearsing in those different activities. And we started sometimes 7 o'clock in the morning, going to sight reading and that kind of thing, where you sight read music. I learned how to sing songs without having the music, as we talked about earlier.
A cappella, yeah, absolutely.
And so that's the kind of thing we had to learn before you got into the choir. And all of those things, I knew I had to overcome and to deal with. And so I just didn't spend any time much socializing. I just concentrated on my studies, and because I didn't want to disappoint my parents and the people back home who knew me and had faith in me, going off like that. So I wanted to please them, and so that's what I set out to do.
How now? When you went, obviously you stayed in a dorm or something on campus, and then when you came home, was that once a month, or how often did you come home? Because I know I've heard a lot of people, homesickness is a big deal.
Didn't come home when I left. I didn't come home till the break at Thanksgiving.
Wow. So that first semester was kind of tough. Huh?
Oh, it was definitely tough, but that's the way it was. And I always think about students now, making comparison. They're home about every weekend. You can't miss them sometimes because they're back and forth. But I stayed until Thanksgiving before I came home, and that was definitely. And then we had all the correspondence I had was through mail. You had to write letters. There were no telephones. You couldn't call up and tell mom or daddy anything. You had to write them a letter.
Nobody was doing texting, I don't think, at that time.
No texting and social
media didn't exist.
That's exactly right. So everything was by letter and everything, and so and that was really difficult. Mm-hmm.
When that first year, do you recall the first semester and the second semester? After that first semester, did time seem to move swifter for you, or did you hit any roadblocks anywhere, or did things kind of fall into place?
Didn't have any roadblocks. I just enjoyed it so much. The difference in leaving the farm, with the background that I had, and going to a school in Greensboro was quite a big change for me. That's indoor bathrooms and all of that. Yeah. This was different from what I had at home.
Absolutely.
And so that was something I look forward to. And having central heat and in a dormitory. So I had something to look forward to. So when I would come home, that was a different story.
Yeah.
So we had different kinds of things there.
But now, after your 4-year tenure at A&T, then you moved on to your master's degree.
Yes.
Tell us about that. And when you left your 4-year, did you have design in your mind at that time to go ahead and complete a master's? Of course, followed by your doctorate. But how did that master's work for you? Was that planned, or was this something you got into, or what?
Yeah, I was teaching at a school here in the county, in Sampson County. And the principal at that time asked me, had I ever considered going into school administration? And I told him, no, I hadn't. I said, I just wanted to be a teacher. And he said, I think you would make a good school administrator. He said, but you need to go back to school and get your master's degree from somewhere. He said, I think you would do good. He said, I would notice how you work with the children around and everything. And I think you would be very good at that. Mm-hmm. And so then I decided to enroll and go to college and get a master's. And before I finished my master's, the summer that I was finishing it up was whenever I got a call to asked me if I wanted to become principal of school. If I did, I needed to come home for an interview on that Friday night. And so I left and came, and I got the job. It wasn't the one that I wanted at the time, but it was the one that the superintendent thought that I should have. Mm-hmm. And he placed me at Halls Piney Grove Middle School. Mm-hmm. I was wanting to go to Hog Grove because that's where I had...
you were close, though.
I was close, and I had done my student teaching there, and I had taught there for 7 years. And I wanted to be there, but he said he wanted to make sure that the students got a chance to have a diverse experience. And he said, and if you go there, you have students coming in from Hopton Elementary and from Hog Grove Elementary, and they'll all have that experience. And said, I want you in the middle. And so that's what he did. And he put me down. It made a lot of sense to me, after I got into administration, that's what we needed. There was that kind of diversity. The kids needed to see someone in a leadership role. And that way he did it. And he sent Dr. Langdon over to the other school.
One of the things I want to do is back up very quickly. And we missed this, which I think is a key piece. Talk to us about that time when you came home from your 4-year degree and you had the opportunity for that job, because you had an interim there. You applied for a teaching job, mm-hmm. but at the same time you were then back with a 4-year degree. You were working on the farm. Tell us how all of a sudden you transitioned into education from that particular farming environment and what you were doing and what you finished. That was an interesting piece. I remember we talked about that several years ago.
Oh, yeah. I was working. I had gotten out of school, and I was working in tobacco and out on the farm. And I had promised one of my neighbors I was going to help him in tobacco. And I did, and I got call, a letter saying that I needed to come in for an interview. And it was at the same time that we were supposed to be working on this gentleman's farm.
This is crop and tobacco.
Crop and tobacco, yeah. So I left. I had it set for maybe, I believe it was around 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock that day. I was supposed to go to the office and meet with the superintendent. So I left the field, went home and dressed and came to Clinton for my interview. And while I was here, I got hired for the job. And so then I turned around and I went back home and went back into the field and told them that I got the job as a teacher and I would be teaching at Hot Grove when school started in September. I mean, I was elated, but the thing about it is whenever you make a promise to somebody that you're going to help them do things, you need to keep that promise. You don't need to.
Sort of surprised the farmer, didn't it?
Oh, it surprised him, yeah. But he was a strong supporter of mine, and he stayed that way all the way through until he passed away. We were always good friends. That's
an interesting piece. When we discussed this several years ago, I remember you mentioning that to me, and I thought, how much character does it take to go back to a tobacco field, having known personally what that's like with tobacco gum and all that, to go back to that field knowing that you just got a job that's going to put you in a classroom teaching. It's two completely different environments. That took a lot of determination.
Oh yeah, but that was it. I remember that very well, and it was something that I always did. Even after I became a teacher, I would go back and work in the field during the summer and have some little crops myself, peppers, cucumbers, things like that. So
did it help you appreciate that job even more?
It certainly did. And I could understand the students and what they were doing and where they came from and what they were having to encounter, to get to do what they were doing. So I think it was a good experience for me.
We're coming up on our next segment, and as we go to break, I want to encourage folks to continue to stay tuned. So we'll be back. We'll be back in a moment, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking with Dr. Larry Bell. We're talking about his path and his journey historically to becoming a legislator in Raleigh for 18 years. We'll be back in a moment.
To get the most out of your electronic devices, you need a strong internet connection and a protected home Wi-Fi network. You need high-speed internet from Star. Star has the fastest, most affordable high-speed internet service available for all your devices. We have no long-term contracts or high-pressure sales. Our service speaks for itself, and switching is hassle-free. We take care of everything with free installation from a local company. High-speed internet from Star. Internet at the speed of life.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I want to thank you for being with us today. We're coming up on the last segment of the show here today, talking with Dr. Larry Bell about his journey and pathway, if you will, to the State House. We've had a wonderful discussion. Want to remind you can reach us at weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. If you'd like to drop us a card, it's Post Office Box 1482, Clinton, North Carolina. Just send it to We Should Know, Post Office Box 1482, Clinton, North Carolina, or you can just simply address it to WSK, Clinton, North Carolina, Post Office Box 1482. We should get that. So we look forward to hearing from you. Want to continue our conversation. Dr. Bell, again, thank you for being with us. We've talked about quite a bit of things that impacted your life. You ended up getting your doctorate degree from East Carolina University, and you were talking a bit about the administration part in the last segment as you talked about taking over the operation of the school at that time called Halls Piney Grove. Prior to that, it was Halls, and the communities of Piney Grove and Halls came together, thus changing the name.
That's correct.
That was a strategic move, I think, on the part of the superintendent in choosing you at that time, because you had good footing in both communities up there.
That's correct.
If you as you look at that now, what were some of the challenges that you saw during that period of time?
Well, one of the things that I think about there, most of the parents knew me, and it was kind of difficult sometimes, I think, for them to look upon me as a school administrator and not as just a neighbor who lived down the street, which I thought was a positive thing because I could deal with the children much better and with the parents, their concerns, because they trusted me and they knew who I was and what I was all about. And it wasn't like getting to know some principal who was from way off that nobody in the community knew, but everybody knew me, and that helped me quite a bit in dealing with the students at that time.
One of the things also in that it kind of prepared you for that next step, if you will, to superintendent. Going through that process, what do you recall about that movement as you felt yourself kind of being moved toward the leadership role of the entire district, the school district itself, as superintendent?
Well, I didn't have any aspirations to become superintendent or anything like that. I had never thought about that move. It just happened one night. The superintendent resigned, and the board had to make a decision because it was on the school was supposed to start the next day. The school was going back into session the next day, and they wanted to know if I would take over as interim superintendent until they got somebody, because he had resigned and he had walked out. And I was sitting there saying, what in the world is going on here? And I told him that I would, but I would not take it on a day-to-day basis. I said I would have to have it for a date certain. I said, because if I'm going to deal with the staff and everything, they need to know that I'm going to be in charge for a while. And I would like to know that too, rather than have a day-to-day basis. I said, because I've seen that happen before, and it doesn't work very well. And so they agreed to give me a year, and it was also important to me to know that that was my 29th year in the school system, and I only needed one more to reach retirement. So I knew at that point that I was going to retire as superintendent of schools, because I only had 1 year to go. You
certainly could do that with ease.
But in January of that year, they gave me a 4-year contract, even though I was supposed to be it was an interim situation, and it was supposed to start at the end of my interim contract, which was in June, which meant that I would have at least 5 years in there. And so I thought that was really good too. And
that propelled you forward.
Yeah, evidently I impressed somebody enough to give me a contract early to keep me on for 4 more years. And so that was good. And it was something that I had not aspired to do, but when I got into it, it was okay. Everybody accepted me pretty well, and teachers knew me as a teacher and as a coach. And so I was not new to the system. They didn't have to get accustomed to me as being some kind of as an outsider or whatever. And it worked very well. And I think it was a plus for me that the people knew me already, and they supported me very strongly. I never could have asked for any more support from the teaching staff, principals, and everybody.
One of the things that strikes me in talking with people over the years that work with you and for you as superintendent and as principal, you had this way of being very personable and compelling with people and bringing people together and kind of making people feel like that word we hear a lot about working as a team and all that kind of thing. Where did that skill set come from? Did that come from academics? Did that come from your background, family upbringing, faith? How did you develop that? Because you certainly have that reputation of being able to bring people together.
Well, I think it just came from a family thing where, like I said, my daddy working in the church and everything, and in the community where I just grew up believing that everybody needed to be working for the good of all. And I've carried that philosophy all the way through my life. I never, even as a legislator, I never thought about political parties as much as I did what was good for the district that I represented. So I looked at issues rather than voting for a party situation. I tried to see what was, and so sometimes I would go against the party affiliation and vote for something else that I thought was right, and the right thing to do. And I believe that's the main thing, is to do what you feel like is right. And that situation has brought me this far, and that's what I kind of lean on all the time.
What drew you into the political realm to decide to step into the State House as a key component of the legislature, particularly District 21?
What drew me into that was I saw so many needs that I thought we had in the schools, and that I knew that in order to get some of those things like salaries and better school facilities and all that, it had to come through the legislature. And so I felt like that going to the legislature was just an extension of what I was already doing. And so I got in there, and I was placed on the education committees. I became chairman of the education committee in the legislature, and also for the national legislative thing. I was president of the NCSL education committee for 1 year, and president-elect. So I felt like I had an impact on education all the way through, even nationally.
Was that an eye-opening experience for you, walking into that legislature and understanding, getting a grasp from the inside out how things operate?
Oh, definitely it was. It was, and it still is. It amazes me. It's the process that you have to go through. And I think lots of time people would have a greater appreciation if they knew how you had what you had to do to go through to get a bill passed, or to get some things passed in the legislature.
I think that's where your collective skill of trying to get people to work together and bring people together really benefited you very well in that environment.
It certainly did, and even though it starts at the grassroots and goes all the way through, but that's something that I feel like in today's world is lacking, because there's too much partisanship whenever it should be. Education is not a partisan situation. It's a thing that everybody should buy into, and health, education, and welfare situations ought to be something that everybody could universally work to do the best thing in.
If you had to give us a statement of what you would like to see as your legacy statement, what would that statement look like? What words would be involved in that?
I'm supposed to be writing a book now, sort of autobiographical, and it's going to be a walk by faith. And so
that would be it.
That's it.
Well, I want to thank you for being with us today. I want to also let folks know that If they want to watch an extended overtime of We Should Know here, they can go to Star Communications YouTube. We're going to continue the conversation because certainly we can't get everything in one show with We Should Know. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to be sure to go to Star Communications YouTube, see the extended version of some more in-depth personal conversation with Dr. Bell on some things he found critically important as he moved through this journey to his position in the legislature, and as he looks at the rest of his life as we fulfill that journey. And we will see you again soon, and may God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host J.W. Simmons. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion regarding this or any episode, please send your emails to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.